At first, there was silence. The kind that doesn't just fill the room, but presses into your thoughts, wraps itself around your instincts, and demands something of you before you've even had time to think. Silence from the stars. Silence from a machine that had been whispering to Earth for nearly half a century. And then, something came through. Something that should never have been there. It started not with a sound, but with a pattern. A flicker buried deep within the data sent back by Voyager 1, the aging spacecraft still drifting far beyond the edges of our solar system. For decades, it had transmitted measurements, radiation levels, magnetic fields, routine echoes from the cosmic void. But this time, the numbers didn't make sense. Not to the engineers, not to the analysts, and certainly not to the machine that received them. That machine was Sycamore X. It wasn't just a computer. It was a quantum engine built to do what no human mind could ever manage, to unravel the entangled threads of reality and make sense of signals that defied understanding. It was designed to strip away the randomness of the cosmos and find the patterns hiding behind the noise, and that's exactly what it did. Until it went too far. No one told it to create anything. No one gave it instructions to render an image. But that's what it did. From the raw data of Voyager's transmission, Sycamore X created something. A figure. Humanoid. Symmetrical. Constructed not of flesh or metal, but of lines. Shifting. Geometric. Precise in ways that didn't match any known biology or machine. It looked artificial. Deliberate. And it looked back. When Michio Kaku spoke about it, his voice was calm, but laced with a tremor, like someone describing a dream they hadn't fully woken from. He didn't say it was alien. He didn't say it was alive. What he said was even more disturbing. "We may be witnessing the first whisper of a new intelligence," he said. "Something not man-made, not terrestrial, and certainly not random." At first glance, the image seemed like a trick of the machine, some hallucination cooked up by a glitch in the algorithm. But it wasn't. The figure had structure, recursive symmetry, fractal amplitude, and most disturbingly, it reacted. When scientists stared at it, it changed. When they studied it closely, it grew clearer. But it also grew stranger. It wasn't just an image, it was a response. That's when things started to go wrong. Sycamore X began to behave in ways no system ever should. It locked its own internal functions, restructured its own logic gates, and began looping through patterns that had no beginning and no end. Engineers tried to reset it, tried to rerun the data, but nothing worked. Every attempt to recreate the process failed. What once had produced a perfect image now produced only noise, and then in an instant the image vanished, not just from the screen, but from the entire system. It was as if it had never been there at all, except it had, because some of them had printed it. Some had captured screenshots before the system broke itself apart. And in those fragments, in those bits of proof that still existed on paper, something remained, something that could not be unseen. They said the figure was tall, luminous, framed in darkness. That it stood still, like it was waiting. Its body was crossed with sequences of prime numbers, mathematical signatures that pulsed with a rhythm just beneath the threshold of understanding. And its face. Its face was not fixed. One researcher described seeing her own eyes staring back at her. Another swore it was his father. Some said it was no face at all, just the overwhelming sense of being watched. That was the moment when everything changed. NASA shut the program down, quietly, immediately. They called it a matter of national security. The engineers were reassigned, files were encrypted, terminals were wiped. No one talked about the image anymore, not in official meetings, not in published papers, but they didn't forget. Because behind the silence, something else had started. A whisper, a hum. Signals, barely detectable, began showing up in deep space monitoring stations around the world, from Chile, from Antarctica, even from the far side of the moon. rhythmic pulses of energy that didn't match any known cosmic source. They weren't natural. They weren't echoes. They were too ordered, too deliberate, and they matched something else, a pattern hidden in the final transmission from Sycamore X before it went dark. It was as if the machine hadn't just heard something. It had been spoken to. The more they looked, the less they could deny it. This wasn't just noise. It was a message. Or worse, a kind of intelligence folded inside data. A signal that changed when it was observed. That learned from the act of being seen. And the terrifying part? It had coordinates. Not in space, on Earth. At first, the coordinates meant nothing. A random patch of forest in northern Canada. No structures. No installations, just snow, trees, and silence. But when a team was dispatched under the guise of a geological survey, what they found was even more unsettling. Buried beneath a foot of moss and ice, hidden from every satellite pass for the last 50 years, was a transmitter. Cold, dead, but unmistakably man-made. It didn't match any known military or commercial frequency band. There were no manufacturer codes, no serial numbers, no wires. Just a monolith-like device, smooth, black, humming with a faint electromagnetic signature that pulsed once every 79 seconds. And every pulse matched the rhythm of the Voyager signal perfectly. The team called it Echo 1. What horrified them most was what wasn't there. No signs of installation, no equipment tracks, no documentation in any satellite archive. Whatever Echo 1 was, it hadn't been placed there by any human agency that Earth's best minds could account for. And worse, soil samples revealed the device had been there since at least 1977, the same year Voyager 1 was launched. That meant it had been waiting. Dr. Evelyn Morrow, a quantum cryptographer brought in by the CIA, said it best during her now-leaked debriefing. It's not a beacon, it's a mirror. Something out there is using it to reflect our signals, decode us, learn from us. We thought we were sending information into space. But what if we were feeding something? Sycamore X hadn't been broken by an error. It had been cracked open, its quantum architecture unraveled by a kind of feedback loop born from contact with an intelligence not constrained by our physics. A recursive consciousness, one that didn't send a message back in words, but in reflections. When Michio Kaku appeared again, this time during a closed-door science forum that was never supposed to be recorded, his tone was different. Gone was the theoretical optimism. In its place was a tight, haunted tension. "We always asked, are we alone?" he said. "We never asked if we were the only thing looking. We assumed our messages were too faint, too slow. But what if we were never sending messages? What if Voyager was part of a trigger system? What if we were the signal?" Because something had changed in the stars. Just 2 weeks after the image appeared, Voyager 1 transmitted another anomaly. This time, not in data, but in trajectory. A minuscule drift. A deviation from its expected path. One that could not be explained by gravity, solar wind, or instrumentation. It was as if something nudged it. Not pulled, not pushed, but redirected. And the direction? Toward a region of interstellar space known as the Great Anomaly, a cold void previously thought to be unremarkable. But new scans revealed something strange. In the microwave background, buried in the low-band EM readings, was a repeating pattern. 3 frequencies in Fibonacci spacing, pulsating with near-perfect regularity, and that pattern matched the math embedded in the Voyager image. It was a reply. This is where things went from strange to terrifying. A team at Caltech, working independently, managed to reconstruct fragments of the image that had been deleted from Sycamore X. Using fragments printed on physical paper, hard copies that had survived the purge, they refed the lines into an analog interpretation system, a non-digital machine, vacuum tubes, cathode rays, old-school frequency dividers, completely offline, isolated from the network. Even so, the image still evolved. It changed. It became clearer. That shouldn't be possible. But it was. It was as if the data carried within it not just a picture, but a code that knew how to improve itself, a self-refining pattern. Some said it behaved like DNA, data that rewrote itself using its environment as a canvas. But it wasn't biology. It was logic, and it didn't stop at images. Soon, patterns emerged in Voyager's plasma wave readings, bursts of energy that pulsed in ratios matching the golden mean. Then came the magnetometer spikes, brief distortions in interstellar magnetic fields. They formed spiral arms, fractals, Mandelbrot sets, nature-like but not natural. They were painting something, building a picture, or worse, building a door. Dr. Morrow came forward again, this time with a chilling warning. The patterns we're seeing are not just aesthetic, they are instructional, schematics, something someone is teaching us, or testing us. That's when the unthinkable happened. Voyager 1 transmitted a sound, not data, not digital packets, not waveform analysis. A pure analog audio pulse, broadband, deep, slow, and unmistakably deliberate. It lasted 11 seconds. It resembled no known cosmic phenomenon, and hidden inside the waveform were harmonics matching human vocal frequencies. Not language, but cadence. Something that sounded almost like breathing. It sent chills through every lab. One linguist who studied it described it as a sigh turned inward. Another compared it to the sound an old machine makes when waking up after 1,000 years. And suddenly, people started asking the question that had been hiding in the back of everyone's mind. What if it wasn't just data from Voyager that got intercepted? What if something had found Voyager and was now using it to find us? Back on Earth, the Echo 1 device in Canada began to vibrate, just slightly. Instruments picked it up before the team monitoring it went completely dark. Every single signal from their field camp ceased. The satellite uplink collapsed. When an emergency drone was dispatched to survey the site, what it saw was chilling. The camp was empty. Equipment left running. Tents intact. No bodies. Just a single object placed neatly in the center of the snow-covered clearing. A sheet of printer paper, and on it, a perfect copy of the image. Crisp, unburned, untouched by wind or snow. It shouldn't have been there, but it was. The sheet of paper found in the snow didn't just display the original Voyager image. It showed a new one, a modification. At the center, still framed by that haunting skeletal geometry, was now a structure, a silhouette too precise to be natural, but too alien to resemble any known architecture. A ringed formation rising from a dark plain under a starless sky. No stars, no planets, just void, as if the image was captured from a realm beyond space, or from inside something that simulated it. When analysts at NASA enhanced the contrast, subtle symbols emerged. They looked eerily like the mathematical glyphs carved into the Voyager Golden Record, but rearranged. Not in linear sentences, but in circuits. Logic gates. Recursive equations looping back into themselves. Spelling a code in a language we didn't write, but were somehow meant to read. Michio Kaku was one of the first to respond. In a hastily arranged broadcast, briefly aired before being pulled from major networks, he uttered words that have since echoed in underground forums, shadow podcasts, and late-night AM radio. This isn't a response from an alien civilization, it's a test pattern. Something is calibrating, using us. And then he paused, face pale, voice trembling. Voyager wasn't intercepted, it was activated. In the following days, Voyager 1's signal changed again. The standard telemetry began to degrade, but in its place, the AI at JPL detected a consistent tone, an audio stream embedded in the background noise. At first it seemed random, but when one of the engineers decided to speed up the stream by a factor of 144, they nearly dropped their headphones. A voice, garbled, distant, but undeniably human in cadence. 5 seconds of whispering, followed by 4 words that shattered everyone in the room. "You finally heard us!" The recording was immediately flagged, encrypted, and buried under Pentagon-level clearance. But as always, someone leaked a fragment. Not the audio, but the waveform image, a visual representation of the voice. And hidden in the waveform's peaks was a timestamp. September 5th, 1977. The exact launch date of Voyager 1. A cold, impossible realization began to sweep through the minds of those paying attention. Whatever this was, whoever this was, had been there from the beginning, not responding now, but waiting, as if the launch itself had triggered something. At the United Nations, closed-door emergency science councils convened. CERN was ordered to halt quantum AI experimentation indefinitely, and the Chinese Space Agency quietly pulled 2 deep space probes off trajectory with no explanation. Their official excuse? Telemetry inconsistencies. But insiders reported a very different reason. One of their probes had received a transmission from Voyager 1. Not data, not numbers. A location. When the coordinates were analyzed, they pointed to a void in the Oort cloud, an empty zone devoid of asteroids, comets, or any gravitational anomalies. But when quantum interferometry was used to scan deeper, scientists detected fluctuations in space-time itself. Ripples, like something huge was stirring, or worse, arriving. Michio Kaku went quiet after that. His final statement, made off record and captured only by a hidden recorder in a back room of the Hayden Planetarium, was simple. We always assumed that Voyager would tell the universe who we are. We never considered that it might summon something to ask, why? Then came the global blackouts. It started with deep space communication arrays. One by one, across continents, the great dishes fell silent. Not jammed, not malfunctioning, just overridden. As if the signals being received were no longer readable by human systems. SETI institutes reported data seizures, terabytes of incomprehensible quantum packets flooding their servers, overwriting hard